In 2001, a Japanese amusement park mere miles away from Mount Fuji would open Dodonpa, one of the most ridiculous thrill rides ever conspired. It took the record for the world's fastest roller coaster and the record for the world's fastest roller coaster acceleration. Roller coaster enthusiasts from all over the world traveled to experience this coaster and its launch, and the ride gained legendary status. However, a renovation later into its life caused a series of injuries including fractured spines, and the ride was permanently closed. But how? How did this ridiculous creation end up breaking people's bones, and how did it happen so late into its service life? Before answering that, we need to back up 2 years. Utah, 1999. The founder of an amusement rides company is inspired to make his first roller coaster. Stan Checketts, the founder of American manufacturer S&S Power, dreams up the Thrust Air 2000 coaster model. This came to him one day when riding one of his custom snowmobiles up a near vertical hill. He then wondered if he could take his drop tower design that used compressed air to launch passengers up the tower, lay it on its side, and launch a roller coaster train with the same method. These shot towers had already seen dozens of sales around the world, including 12 in 1998. But now, Checketts and S&S would convert this idea into a roller coaster, and a prototype was constructed on their testing grounds. North American theme park representatives, among other people who rode the prototype, all agreed that the experience was unique and fast. The compressed air launch allowed for extremely quick accelerations, and it was conceptualized that this model could accelerate riders up to over 100 miles per hour and take those riders up a hill of over 300 feet in height. This brand new launch technology intrigued many theme parks and coaster enthusiasts, but one theme park chain in particular wanted to get their hands on it. Paramount Parks jumped at the chance to purchase the prototype for a $15 million price tag, and it was rumored that it would be sent to Paramount's Great America in California. However, these plans fell through, and it was sent to Virginia's Kings Dominion instead. Additional track was added to complete the circuit, and on the 24th of March 2001, Hypersonic XLC opened to the public. This exhilarating attraction would take riders from 0 to 80 miles per hour in 1.8 seconds up a 165-foot tall top hat. Following the summit comes a high-speed left-hand turn before an airtime hill would send the train into the brake run. Being one of 3 unique launched roller coasters to open at Kings Dominion in the last 5 years, Hypersonic looked like another smash hit for the park. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a Japanese amusement park ceases operation of a record-breaking roller coaster permanently. Moonsault Scramble closes after 17 years of service to make way for future expansion. This creation from Japanese manufacturer Meisho once held the record for the world's tallest shuttle coaster, and it was also one of the most intense. Due to only one spike containing a lift hill or some sort of propulsion mechanism, the ride pulled a psychotic 6.5 G-forces. For more information, I recommend checking out ElToroRyan's video, which goes in depth on what this coaster's legal status would be today and basically how the ride works. But anyway, the ride that would succeed this diabolical scream machine would be just as ambitious. This would be another Thrust Air 2000 coaster that used the same compressed air launch technology as Hypersonic. After being delayed from July 2001 to December 2001 due to issues with getting the launch up to speed and the cables that produce the launch rubbing up against each other, Dodonpa opened to the public. The name Dodonpa comes from the sounds of playing Japanese taiko drums. In the queue line, you could hear people chanting the name like they are playing the drums. This attraction would break the record for the world's fastest roller coaster previously held by Superman the Escape and Tower of Terror, and it would also break the record for the world's fastest roller coaster acceleration previously held by its predecessor at Kings Dominion. So how does the record-breaking launch actually work? Before the launch, 4 800 horsepower air compressors that are housed near the launch tunnel compress air and store that air in storage tanks. When the launch engages, the air is released, making it expand rapidly and pushing it against a series of pistons. The pistons connect to gears and cables which propels the train out of the launch tunnel. Overall, it's a very similar system to the space shot tower rides that inspired the coaster. Dodonpa propels its riders from a standstill to 107 miles per hour in 1.8 seconds, while its sister coaster Hypersonic accelerated to 80 miles per hour in the same amount of time. This launch leads to a section of straight track that dips down and soars into a long drawn-out turn. Following the turn comes the 171-foot tall top hat, giving passengers loads of airtime before dropping down into a left-hand turn that transitions into a series of brakes, ending the ride. In summary, Dodonpa is a very unique experience with a launch system never tried before on other roller coaster models. But there is something else about this ride that is unique to the Thrust Air 2000, its tires. Hypersonic and Dodonpa both use pneumatic tires instead of the very common metal polyurethane tires. Dodonpa in particular was fitted with 60 of these tires, which are usually found on aircraft. While these tires are very quiet and durable as they were designed to sustain high speeds, they were a giant maintenance headache. On Hypersonic, the high G-forces sustained would crush the tires on top of stressing the track. Along with the mountain of issues that this ride faced, cracks were often found in some spots of the track. King's Dominion attempted to mitigate these issues over the 2002 season by applying modifications in which the ride did not operate until June 20th. But the issues still poured in, and the park could only keep this maintenance nightmare alive for so long. In 2006, King's Dominion's first signs of removing Hypersonic came when the ride was put up for sale. The following season would be its last season of operation, as Hypersonic would be dismantled by the start of the 2008 season. As for Dodonpa, its reputation experienced a slight hiccup due to a minor accident. On May 15, 2007, a 37-year-old man who was sitting in the back row sustained a right knee injury from part of a plastic cover that dislodged from the ride. The plastic cover came off due to cracks made from the ride's vibrations, but this occurred by the time the train was slowing down into the brakes, so it could have been much worse. The ride continued to operate normally following this accident. The trains even received new designs around 2010. Originally, the designs portrayed the Dodonpa family with a train representing the father, mother, daughter, and baby. The mouth stretched in a scream under each train so you were seated between the teeth. Following the redesign, the trains now represented a cheetah, snake, zebra, and a strawberry. And don't ask me what those mean, because I have no idea. The only takeaway you need from this is that the zebra train looks cool, okay? For 6 more years, Dodonpa would operate without any other accidents, but in October 2016, the coaster would undergo a permanent change that would shape its dangerous future. On October 3, 2016, Fuji-Q Highland commenced a major renovation of Dodonpa, temporarily ceasing normal operation. The ride stood SBNO, or standing but not operating, as the towering top hat element was torn down and replaced with a massive 161-foot tall vertical loop. This was far from the only change, however, as the track length increased from 3,901 feet to 4,081 feet. The trains with their lap bar restraints were also replaced, with new futuristic trains containing over-the-shoulder vest restraints. But the final and most noteworthy modification, as you will see later on, was the top speed and acceleration. As discussed earlier, Dodonpa stole the record for the world's fastest acceleration on a roller coaster. The coaster maintained this record throughout its service life, and it would continue to hold the record as the acceleration needed to be increased in order for the train to complete the loop. So the new acceleration was from 0 to 112 miles per hour in a side-splitting 1.56 seconds. That's 3.3 G-forces, more than what astronauts experience when taking off in a space shuttle. Dodonpa would reopen on the 14th of July 2017 under the new name Dodonpa. While the Top Hat Tower and its airtime was and still is missed today, Dodonpa was still ridiculous. The force on the launch was still being compared to getting shot out of a gun or getting hit by a semi-truck going 100 miles per hour. But I'm sure the first comparison would be a bit more pleasant. For the next couple of seasons, the ride continued to operate with its towering vertical loop and adjusted acceleration. However, something arose around the globe that would change this attraction's story forever. COVID-19, the one little virus that could. And yes, it majorly impacted the theme park world as well, especially Japanese theme parks. From not being allowed to scream on a roller coaster of any sorts to ride operators taking extra precautions to ensure safety of the riders and themselves, it was tough for Dodonpa. But the ride and its operators pressed on until the end of 2020. 2021 was more of the same, and it was nothing but normal operation for the record-breaking attraction. But it wasn't. In August of 2021, Fuji-Q shut down Dodonpa for investigation. Was something weird happening? What was happening? It was announced by Fuji-Q shortly after the closure that at least 4 riders from the ages of 30 and 59 suffered broken bones. Later on, a hotline was set up for other individuals who had suffered injuries following rides on Dodonpa. In just 2 days, another 9 claims surfaced, including 2 people that were diagnosed with fractured bones. These fractures were occurring primarily in the neck, spine, and back, which are extremely dangerous areas of the body to break. Anything from thoracic spine fractures, which occur when a bone in the spine collapses, to cervical fractures were reported. Cervical fractures often occur in falls, car accidents, or by an overwhelming force. The latter describes Dodonpa's launch, as it always pushed the limits of the human body. In fact, it would do this to such a level of frequency and intensity that it made some riders extremely uncomfortable. However, no one ever broke any bones. While no concrete cause was found for these injuries, a few theories surfaced over the ride's SPNO period. You see, all of these reports of injury occurred during the pandemic, a time when Japanese theme parks were under very strict rules and regulations. One of these regulations was that ride operators were not allowed to pull down and check riders' restraints. Because of this, Dodonpa ride operators could not push down the restraint as far as it could go, which is called stapling, which meant that passengers could have wiggle room. And a common brace before a roller coaster among many Japanese theme park goers is leaning forward in their seat. If a passenger leaned forward prior to the start of Dodonpa, the launch would carry only the train's mass while the passenger would be flung back into their seat. If the passenger kept their head and back against the seat, or if they were stapled, their body mass would be carried with the train, causing little risk of injury. But there are a few holes in this theory. One of these holes is that if Japanese theme park goers leaned forward to brace for the start of a launch coaster like Dodonpa, injuries would have likely been more common not just in this 8-month time span, but throughout the ride's service life. Another contradiction to this theory is that some of the injuries sustained were neck and spinal compression fractures. Moreover, they were not from mechanical pain or pain involving the skeleton anatomy being compromised. Another theory is that the transition between the old track and the new track is to blame. Since the renovations, some complaints of the ride came from the track connection heading into the loop. Riders often described a violent thump or jolt between the original Dodonpa track and the new Dodonpa track. But once again, some of these injuries were compression fractures, so this is unlikely. With all of this in mind, we can conclude that the sheer force of the launch and the fact that some people's bodies can't handle that amount of force in such a quick time was the primary culprit of these injuries. And remember, most people who did report injuries were primarily middle-aged, and the aging process starts to take a toll on the body around that time. Of course, it could be a combination of all these theories I mentioned, or it could be something entirely different. Feel free to leave your theories in the comments below. Anyway, long talks between Fuji-Q and SNS Worldwide went on behind the scenes while an absolute mountain of news outlets poured in their reports on the story of the Super Death roller coaster. Additionally, Fuji-Q was subject to quite a bit of backlash from the public and government officials for not reporting the injuries to the local government. After 2.5 years of silence regarding the state of the coaster, Fuji-Q and SNS finally came to a conclusion. On March 13, 2024, Fuji-Q Highland released an official statement confirming the future of Dodonpa, and it wasn't good for fans of the ride and people with this ride on their bucket list. Quote, although we have held repeated discussions with the manufacturer regarding ways to ensure safe operation, we have come to the conclusion that it is difficult to make it concrete. In order to fulfill our social responsibility as an amusement park that puts safety first, we have decided to close business. This model, including its predecessor, is Fuji-Q Highland's representative coaster, which has been ridden and supported by 9.3 million people since its opening in December 2001. We have received requests from many customers to resume business, but we apologize for not being able to respond to them. We would also like to express our deepest sympathies to the customers who were injured despite coming to the park. We will continue park business with the safety and security of all of our customers as our top priority. End quote. Just like that, the fastest accelerating roller coaster in the world was gone. The once legendary attraction was killed off in a few short years, all ironically because of the park attempting to revitalize the ride. Japanese theme parks stress safety much more than any average theme park, so it would have been very difficult for the coaster to get back up and running, especially with the injuries not being the rider's fault. And now, the record for the world's fastest acceleration on a roller coaster is up for grabs between Six Flags Great America and Thorpe Park, but you all can argue in the comments about that because I'm not going into that. But in summary, Dodonpa was a freak of nature, and its closure affected the people who rode it and the people who never got the chance, myself included. It's truly unfortunate to see such an innovative and fascinating roller coaster ruined by an attempt to improve the ride. And it will live on in the hearts of people globally for its launch and as a reminder of the Coaster Wars era. To end off, here's a quote from Our Worlds in their review on the original Dodonpa. Quote, to me, Dodonpa is like a V8 Corvette. It's loud, it guzzles fuel, and it's a questionable purchase in comparison to something more practical like a much more economical 4-cylinder Mercedes. But the Corvette, much like Dodonpa, isn't about practicality. It's about the pursuit of the feeling you get when you put your foot down and push something to the limit. And just because something faster or more high-tech comes along doesn't necessarily mean the older model still can't take the new kid on the block to town. Dodonpa then is something worth appreciating. Its comfort and noise are serious caveats, but for all of its faults, the sensation of that launch is still unparalleled.